Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I see a lot of the same names continuing on, so well done. You've been here for the whole series. That's great. All right. So this is going to be the last webinar in this series, and hopefully we might be able to host some future webinars, hopefully with the Berkeley team and others who want to share. So we'll keep this going on Discord and information on our website, of course. But yeah, exciting. So today we're going to talk about translation tools, right?
Yeah, finally.
All right,
Great.
finally.
Hi,
Go
everyone.
for it.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being here. Thank you. Appreciate that. So today we're going to talk about translation tools, look at a few of them and see first how they work, and then what we can do and how we can, maybe get better results and maximize these tools and how they work. So that's going to be the flight plan for today. The picture of Gesar, I've been asked about it, so maybe I should say a word. It's been painted by Tara Di Gezu, and that's like the Gesar in a Jala form. So it's a beautiful painting. She's an amazing artist, and that's her work. So it's been there watching over us, and we'll be looking at a few Gesar texts today too. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna try to share my screen first. See if I can do that. All right, share. Is it working? Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah, awesome. Okay. All right, so let's try to start. I'm going to show the tools first and how they work on the most simple level for everyone who's new and has never used them. So please, if you're very familiar with these tools, I'm sure most of us here are, please bear with me, but I just want to give a short overview of the tools, the interface, the UI. And then what we'll do is look at the results of translation, and beyond one-off, text we're gonna look at. What is very important is to understand how they work, and I'm gonna try to share some thoughts about that today with you. The idea is to, I think, what is going to be very important is to understand the logic of the tools, what we can do with them, and what is we cannot do. And then I try to show more complex scripts and prompts to try to find fixes to these limitations that we have right now. So I'm going to start with Mitra. So Mitra has been developed by the Berkeley team, Sebastian Erdich and Kurt Keiter, and it's an amazing tool that can translate multiple languages, Buddhist languages. So we have very practically, again, we have two windows. So when you land there, you're going to land on an empty page, and you have two parts here. One is going to be the source text that you're going to input there. And here is going to be the output window. So this is where, say you want to select English, this is where the English translation will show up. So in this window here. So here the source text on the left and the output on the right. And they all models, like we'll see Madame AI in a second, work on that same principle too. So left is the source text, right is the output text. So we just take a text. So here I prepare something to save time, but I'm not going to do that for every single model. But say you go there, go with your text, and you see this text is a Wiley transliteration. So there may be mistakes. The model is very stable. It's very amazing at making sense of a lot of like weird stuff that can happen there. The cleaner the text, the better. The shorter, not necessarily the better, but the longer, yeah, it's getting difficult then. So I would recommend like smaller chunks. You have here pages, and model deals really well with this, as we'll see. And here I had A, B, C, you know, kind of like bullets, right? Or way to structure the paragraph, the passage in paragraph. So, but As we'll see, it's not a huge problem. I can remove that. See, it's even there. So the model makes sense that it's not to be translated, which is really good. The first one is missing though, so you see, it's where we are now, but I think it's pretty amazing. So it's very fast, and if you try this tool, you will realize that very oftentimes you have a limitation in terms of how many tokens you can have in this window. So if you go beyond the limit, at some point the model will tell you you're beyond the limit. Here you're not, so it's working. And the limits, the token limits you can have in this window, I might gonna have that for, maybe it's because I'm copying and pasting the same text. After a while here, you're gonna have a message, an error message saying you're above the token limit, in which case you have to reduce the size. Depending on usage with these tools, my recommendation is if you want to explore very quickly what a text is about and you don't have time to translate it yourself, and when you read, the text may be complicated too, so you want to have an overview really quickly and get a sense of what the difficulties of the text may be or what, the narrative is, yeah, without going into detail too much, and you don't need a translation to be published or to use it, to share it with users, then it's okay to use the entire window. I think it's better though if you when you use the tool, when you don't use maybe the entire token allocation you have here, so you are a little bit below half of it or two-thirds of it. I think is a good practice. Although honestly, the results won't be dramatically different. It's still something you can use and experiment with. Now, being really clear about these tools, I think that the amazing thing they do beyond, time saving and giving like pretty accurate information quite quickly, right? Is that it allows you to explore the text. And that's something I really want to stress today is that, there can be a back and forth between the tools, as we will see then when we move on with other tools like Claude. So these tools, you like Dharma Mitra tool and Moonlight AI, at this time, you have a translation, you can't really then, query the model. There's no window to further query the model about the result here, the output of Mitra, Dharma Mitra, but that's something you can do with other tools, as we will see, which brings, things to the next level, and I believe is a kind of excellent way of dealing with complex passages because it can open up a sense of what readings are possible there and things sometimes, as you know, we wouldn't think about in some cases. So the question at this stage is not whether the tools are so perfect that you push on a button and you have a publishable result and we're going to all be replaced, right? I mean, I'm not saying it like this. I know that all the teams working on these tools are doing their best to get the highest possible degree of accuracy and readability, and that's quite amazing what has been done, as we shall see. But in a way, we still have a lot, as we will see, a lot of human supervision involved, which is a good thing, and which probably will help us cover still, when you take the tools, what they can do, where they are, we can cover probably more ground. And my key thing, which is always we can ask ourselves better questions to about our text. So we don't maybe necessarily through these tools get more answers or better answers than what we could do if we took the time and spent a lot of time on our text. But we may ask ourselves questions we haven't thought even about, and that's part of the process. And that's something I try to convey, in this series of webinars. It's basically having a broader vision of what the text might be about or what the issues in the text may be about. So that's Dhamma Mitra. You have Manlam AI here. The interface is very similar. So you have source text, that's the same source text. Here, that's the translation. That's a Gesar text we're looking at. It's the very beginning of the Dorje Segel sadhana by Mipam Rinpoche. And that's like, when we look at the translation, there are small things I will show, particularly translation of Zorro here, that is, that can be read as a charlatan, and being a charlatan is talking about himself, the Tibetan is saying, a charlatan, a tattered or poor person or destitute person. And this, as we will see, is not really well translated by most models. It's a bit of a difficult, like maybe term, and a bit of so colloquial in a way, particularly Zob, I think, is used here in a very contracted form. But anyway, so see here, it's integrated by the model in the name. There are little things like this, and that's where we are now. I do believe that in the future, these small issues may be solved. So the difference here in Manlam is that you have two models. You have a model, I think, that developed in cooperation with Mitra, and a model that has been developed like probably with a different data set. So Manlam AI is an amazing project too. If you don't know it, I mean, maybe it'd be good to go check in on their website. It's very easy. It's manlam.ai. What they've been doing, they have a series of tools you can convert into a new text. So I had a question, I think last week, about how you can produce, you know, here an OCR version of text and then get the digital text from a scan, an image. So here you can have, you see this, you can load an image here, and then you can have a transcript of what is on this image. It's going to be probably a bit, fastidious if you have a huge text to do. And so BDRC now, I think on GitHub, just posted a few weeks ago, amazing tool that has been developed in cooperation with Eric Werner, I think, and that's available for larger quantities of text you want to OCR. But that's an amazing tool in itself. I tested it on 1 or 2 pages. If it's published material, it's really good. You get a very clean digital text that you can use then in various ways. So you have text to speech, speech to text as well, and then translation, which is what we're interested in, right? So that's the Manlam AI interface. Really, amazing work that had been done by Manlam AI and the Mitra teams to produce tools that are really focusing on the need of translators of Buddhist text across a variety of languages and transliterations too, as you can see. So Sanskrit, I won't go into Sanskrit stuff today, but it's really amazing too. There you have as well, which is really very good, a choice of formats too, of input formats for your source text. And that's really amazing how at Kyoto in Sanskrit. So if you have documents in the Harvard Kyoto transliteration scheme, you can still use them. So really amazing. And here we have a newcomer I wanted to mention because there's been a lot of conversations lately about this new model, DeepSeek. I'm sure you guys heard of it, and we talked briefly last week about it. So here now we're with the models that are not specialized models like Dharma Mitra and Manlam AI. We're in models that are these general massive LLMs that may have been trained on Tibetan Buddhist materials, and then may integrate this data in their, in the gigantic pool of data they used to be trained. I mean, that were used on them to be trained. And so the thing here now is something that I wanted to stress is that, and I hope we can have a webinar probably in the coming, few weeks with Sebastian and Kurt to explain to us, the whole training and the whole importance of trained data in the way these models are produced. Because for us users, so on the user side of things, it's very important to understand, how these models are kind of capable on the most basic level to produce these translations. And part of it is the input data they use to train the model. So this training data, huge data sets. And as we will see, we have to be aware that some of the models may not have been trained on the kind of literature, the genres we are reading for a specific project, right? So there are gaps, there are holes. And so in the training data sets for us, translators or researchers involved with Tibetan Buddhist texts. So we have to be aware of that's very important. So there can be some post-training, fine-tuning, all these things, right, that come and like bridge the gap. But we have always to be aware of that particular issue. That is interesting, and I will show you examples of that on more complex texts. So that's DeepSeek. And with DeepSeek, you have an option here at the bottom, which is R1, the famous R1 that rocked the boat, or the financial markets, I should say, last week. So this is a free model. It's free access, and it works like all the models we've seen so far. You know, the interface, the user interface is very similar, right? So you have your previous chats on the left, you can start a new chat here, there, right? There, I mean, and then you have the window here where you input your prompt, so your query, your question, and here you have the answer and previous prompts out there. So we have the first prompt here, I input it, right? Then we have the answer, and then you can go on and on, as we'll see. That is the big advantage of these massive LLMs, is that they let you engage in a conversation with the model, and so you can keep querying and ask, you know, how do you read that? Why do you translate this like that? Did you check this? You know, so it opens up a lot of perspectives and possibilities in terms of having specific criteria fulfilled by the model during translation, as we will see, and then we can have various strategies and layers, and I will show you that in a minute. So DeepThink R1, when you click on the translation here, is not really good. I would rate it as being not as good as what Mitra and Moonlime can do. The tool is free though, so you can take just like Mitra and Moonlime, they're free tools too, and so that's something where you can that you can use. And if you have big text, and you know, if you don't want to go paragraph by paragraph, you might use DeepSeek for a first like pass at it. If we use DeepThink R1, which is free too, and quite amazing because most reasoning models are quite expensive. So R1 is what is called a thinking or reasoning model. That's a model that integrates kind of like, you know, last week we looked at the chain of thought prompts. So how a model can chain operations through, I mean, steps or stages, and think about at each step the result, and then, you know, reassess the situation and proceed. And this is what simplify things a bit, but that's what R1 does. And here you see the thinking process. So, okay, I need to translate this Tibetan text into English. Let me start by reading through each section carefully. So here the thinking model, which O1 with with OpenAI, so ChatGPT does too. You know, O1 is the other thinking model. It's very popular at this stage. So that's what it would do too. It would document the whole thinking process and what's happening here. So first, the model is parsing, you know, the paragraph into parts, which is good, and you know, it has basic instructions to itself, like I need to check for consistency, especially with proper names and terms. So yeah, this passage has a lot of proper names. Where do they start? Where do they end? It's a question, yeah, we're facing too as humans, and that's definitely, you know, yeah, what the model has to make sense of too. So some parts are a bit unclear, Chadrut and then Nupadesha. So yeah, you have like things. Um, yeah, lot of different questions, and then comes up with a translation. Is better than the non-reasoning version of DeepSeek, but a little bit far off still. Now, Zobhur here is a bit like, you know, you still have Trickster for some, I guess. Charlton would be, or you know, deceiving person. So it's better, but you know, it's still coming short, right? So a little bit. But these models are free, and then you know, you can engage with the model. So I'm giving you an example here. You see, on the most basic level, naive question, right? You get this expression right. You get zero like right. So now you see, okay, the user is asking if I got zero right in the previous translation. Let me check that again. And so here there's a whole like thought process that you can follow and see even if it makes sense or not. So such as myself, right? Is getting Dagdra right, like me, such as myself. Yeah, we're talking about someone. Is known as deeper screening. In my initial translation, I ran it as trickster, a rule for illusion magic, but this could indeed be refined. And so it goes on through a process, you see, and then that's the advantage of the model that is coming in the shape of a general LLM, is that you can have these kind of discussions for the question, and then that's a reasoning model. So you can see as well the flow of thought of the chain of thought of the model and where it makes not sense or not. All right, that's cute. You get a little like but yeah. So it's going to now go with a even worse translation. So you see, anyway, that's what we can uh, do with the models, and sometimes it goes nowhere, and that's part of the exploration process these models allow for. But then it shows as well that they're not quite there yet. If you try GPT now, so that's Chat GPT, and you get the same problems in this part, for example. Yeah, and then so you see, it's like really ChatGPT is really bad. I wouldn't recommend you guys to use it because it's not good at this stage. And there are discussion whether DeepSeek was distilled right now, so kind of produced fast from GPT's training or GPT 4, I think. For that would be probably the assumption, but I think they had extra trained data from, at least for the Tibetan. It seems they're way better than for us than ChatGPT. So, and they're free. So that's the thing. Just as a side note, if you need to deal with a lot of like literature, explore, corporate are quite large. I think that DeepSeek is a free option that is very imperfect at this stage, but can cover a lot of ground to get a sense of what's going on in the text, the outline, all this, and then what you can do is start with an outline of a text you're interested in, and then ask for translation of specific parts as you go deeper, as we have seen through active prompting, into the outline. You can start saying, well, translate for me the section on this. And then you get a sense of like, are they, as we have seen, there are different strategies. You can as well look for entities, places, personalities, then say you're interested in the mention of a specific deity. And then you say, okay, well, translate for me the passage, where this deity name occurs. And so this is really what these LLMs allow you to do. They may not be as good, though, as Manam AI and Dhamma when it comes to technical terminology. Now, there's one model that, for weird reasons we don't know, at this stage is kind of for translators of Tibetan Buddhist texts, is a little bit the best of all worlds. And to be fair, it's Claude, because it's really good at three things, I think. One is to make sense of the background of a text. So there are a lot of genres it's been trained on, obviously, it seems. It's really good at technical terminology, like Buddhist Dharma terminology. It understands that. The translations it produces reads really well in English. They read really well. So there's the English side of 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 the translation work that's really good too. And then the other thing is it gives you the LLM capability of querying, which is very interesting because the way Claude is has been built, it seems they used added documentation you can have for a project. So we've seen how it works, right? It can tap into that which is huge advantage as we will see, and it can really produce results that can be further fine-tuned through dialogue, and it gives you as well a whole explanation about how it gets to this like translation, if this is something you want to have, as we will see in a minute. So how do we use this? We can use these tools to produce a translation of first draft, to get a sense, to explore. I would never use any of these translations for a finished product. I'm just saying it very, very bluntly, because at this stage, it's not, I think, where we are. And so that's why as well, translators are not replaced by these tools. I do believe though that, we're talking about power tools. When I was little, we just had, these tools like, no engine of any kind there. You had to like do everything like wrenches, hammers, all these. Removing paint was a tough work. Had to spend a lot of time, right, with sandpaper and all these things. So when I'm sitting, I bought a set of tools, power tools recently, and I looked at them. I did a few things with that. I'm not very good at that, but I did a few things, and I was thinking, goodness, my grandfather would have cried, if he had seen these things. And so that's a little bit how I'm seeing these translation tools at this stage. It's just that, they are power tools, but they're not doing the work. They don't have the vision for the work at this stage, at least. We're talking right now, maybe all wrong in 3 weeks, but right now, these tools, we have to think of them as power tools, or it's like stepping into this exoskeleton that allows you to lift very heavy things. So the debate about whether these tools are going to replace translators or not, I don't think it's really something personally I'm saying is happening right now, at least. And the other thing too is whether these tools are good or not, because they're stupid, they got the job really wrong, they can make sense of this technical term and all this. I don't think that's a valid point too, from my perspective, because that's like saying that, my power hammer can't, scrape paint from this thing. We're talking about different usages. We're talking about strategies. We're talking about the vision of a work plan. We work right on translation and operations we do as translators, and we'll go through that a little bit. And so these tools can help you with some of these, components of the whole translation process. It's not like something where, again, you fill it with text that's complex, has specialized terminology and everything, pushing a button and you have a perfect translation. So let's think about it for a second as power tools, and I will show you a few examples of why they're actually really powerful. So on the most basic level, you have your translation. That was a draft of translation I did on that text. So you have this translation, and you want the model to have a quick look at it and suggest edits and reviews. And that's really interesting, because with code, you get a very extensive, very detailed review. So it understands the context most of the time. So here, for example, there's a technical term, right? The mutak, this move rope, from which the tempo at the time of the Tibetan Empire would come down from heaven right to earth. And so that's this mythological cord connecting, as the model is saying, heaven and earth. And so you see, it has this kind of like knowledge, background knowledge. And in the Gestalt world, all these things are quite important. There are multiple references to pre-Buddhist Tibet, or to very ancient terminology about, Buddha-inspired culture. So you have a lot of stuff like that. And then here it's making, some suggestions. So saying we can do better than that. So why not? Let's see. So there's feedback, there's advice, there's areas of improvement. You have an actual editing process taking place here on a basic level. Again, I don't think it's going to replace an editor who's very skilled and who understands what a translation project is about, what's the audience or the readership, where we want to go with all this. That's a different thing. Here, we're still in post-translation phase in a way, and it's making edits on that level. like issues of consistency across multiple translations can't be considered, right, at this stage, unless maybe we feed the model with all the PDFs of previous translations. If this is a series, then in that case, we have to have a prompt to say, okay, well, pay attention to the fact that this translation is part of a larger project for which we already have a number of publications, and I wanted the terminology to be in sync with that. So that would actually work, and we will see how we can tap into that in the project knowledge, project documentation. So here it's getting a bunch of like feedback, and I'm like, okay, improve the flow. So it's giving me for the first paragraph, some suggestions. And that can be really interesting because there are things that we wouldn't necessarily think about. The tone might be not something we want, right? The final product may be something, even if it's fully accurate, we don't want because it's not us in a way as a translator. That's not our voice, and we want to change that. But it may give, strategies to deal with long sentences. It may give ideas about a bunch of things, and maybe remind us of points we should consider. So anyway, that is one usage where I think Claude really excels. And as we'll see, prompts can make a whole difference. Now, to 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 be clear, I didn't think that prompting would be that important. Yesterday I finished at 11 or something, and working on the prompt I show you, and I realized, crap, it's actually really important. So like prompting with code is incredibly important, and what you can do through more complex prompts is really amazing. So I'm going to show you the interplay between the translation tool and tools and Claude and how you can use both together now. So now that's the end of my presentation on today on these tools on a basic level. We've seen, Dharma Mitra, we've seen Moonlam AI, DeepSeek, V3, and R1. We've seen ChatGPT, and we've seen Claude, and we've seen how we can use an LLM to edit a human translation or any other translation we want to fit into the model. So
Greg,
maybe
there's a little.
asking for questions here.
Yeah, I was just going to
Is there any
jump in.
question?
There's just one question
Yeah,
about one of the models, so I just want to jump in with that. It's just pretty specific. So on the Moonlam AI, when
yeah,
you go to actually look at the translation piece, there's
right.
two choices, Moonlam Mitra and Moonlam Melong.
Yes.
And the question was just, what's the difference? Why are there two? What's going on there?
Okay. So we would have to ask Ngawang Chinle about the detail
Yeah.
of how these models have been trained. So Ngawang has been developing, I think, with his team at Moonlam AI,
Mm,
these models. My understanding is this one has been developed by the Berkeley Mitra team,
mm,
probably, and this one must be a new model, probably with a slightly different data set.
right.
I have no information about the training data here for Moonlam Melon, and so yeah. I'm sorry, but that's not a very good answer. But my understanding is that they don't rely on the same data set, and maybe there may be as well other strategies or script to improve the translation. I think that the Moonlam AI team is doing an amazing job. I was on one of their forums yesterday and looking at what they're doing they're trying to test new reasoning, I think, approaches to translation, injecting some reasoning into the translation process, so that they will get better answers, better translations, and that's something they're thinking about. I say a word later about that. Everyone is trying, to go towards more of that these days. By having maybe smaller models that are more agile in terms of thinking or reasoning and are more specialized on some tasks. But yeah. Any other question maybe about the interface, or is it okay for everyone?
Well, maybe you could just say even more generally, many of these AI systems are going to have options like this with multiple different
Right.
models to choose from, and some of
That's a
them
good
will
point.
explain more about what they are, but the different models have different abilities at times, right?
Here, exactly, it's a good point, Marcus. Thank you. See here, if you go on Claude,
Mm,
so you can choose the model you want to work with. Now we're working with 3.5 Sonnet, which is the best model for, particularly I think for textual, tasks. So text-oriented work. So it's quite good. You have Opus, you have Haiku as well. Yeah, you have various models you can select here. Now the best one is 3.5 Sonnet, and when I'm talking about Claude, for us, most 95% of the time it's gonna be that one.
mm,
It's the most expensive one if you use the API. If you use their monthly subscription, it's $20 a month at this stage. So, and that's the one. If you go on ChatGPT, here you can select the model too. So you can like so here I'm not on my account, but here if you have a monthly subscription about $20 too, you have access to O1, the reasoning model. And here you can select the model you want to use. Same thing here, that's going to be here on your paid plan version of the UI. So you're going to have here a selection of models right here. And DeepSeek at this stage works, it's only DeepSeek v3 for the free version. And then here you can click on this button. So you see here the button, I clicked on it, it's highlighted, it's R1 is on. And you see it because when you prompt, then you say you have the thinking thing, and then the whole process is documented, which you don't have if you use DeepSeek v3. In that case, you see that's not highlighted. R1 is not
mm,
used here, and you just have the results like it's just normal LLM, no reasoning capabilities here.
right.
Uh, I mean, you can still like prompt for a chain of thought prompt, things like that, but not really like
Mm,
okay.
great. So there's another question here um, about checking for consistency. So
Yeah,
using Claude and asking it to translate for something, could you then upload a glossary and ask it
yeah.
to check for consistency with
I have a
that?
perfect example about
Mm,
that.
nice.
So I'm gonna actually show you where I did that, and it goes beyond just consistency with the glossary. So of course there are consistency issues, and you can totally do that. And you can have a hard find and replace kind of thing in the translation a code would produce. So you can say, okay, for this technical term in the source text, I always want this, or you can have options like saying consider this possibility too in the glossary. And that can be important because of Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. For example, I show an example that's from Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit translated automatically, so to speak, into Tibetan, and where the glossary comes handy, really, to make sense of it. So, all right. Any other question, or it's good? Okay, so now I'm going to go through the two last prompts a bit fast, but we see the four noble prompt, so the agentic algorithmic prompt last week, and this week we'll look more at the chain of thought prompts and the tree of thoughts. So what are they? They are prompts when you use the LLM like Claude or ChatGPT, where you encourage them all to go through a step-by-step breakdown of its so to speak, thinking process, wherever that means. Not going to go into philosophical considerations there, but however the model think or not is being debated really these days. What matters to us is that we'll have a detailed breakdown of the stages the model goes through to land somewhere or to accomplish a task. And so that's really good. So we can, for example, have a comparative analysis of shunyata and different texts from different, authors, different time periods, and ask for a process to be really linear here and give us a step-by-step result there. So it will tell you, it will inform you in the window, answer window about all the steps it went through to reach a certain result. And that can be really a conclusion. And that can be really interesting sometimes because we want to know if the model has skipped any possibility there that matters to us. Tree of thought prompting is that the model is going to consider multiple competing hypotheses and will explore them parallelly in a sort of like comparative, approach, and then we'll either produce a synthesis of these hypotheses or choose from these hypotheses what can be interesting. And for us, it could be interesting because we can work with different translations then produced by different models. So, which is what I'm gonna show you in a minute. So anyway, here, we can ask the model to look at the text from different perspectives based on different doctrinal terminology or just views, right? And so you can examine the text from that, like consider various hypotheses through that prompt, and then bring that together. It may be interesting if you have a technical text or if you have even poetic text, so that is, tapping into different registers, different cultural references as well, or so different background information, and so you can have these defined and ask the model to consider the text from these different angles parallelly, and then consolidate its findings, into a single translation at the end, bring it together. So that can be interesting if you want to emphasize the importance of a specific angle, perspective in the text, issue of topicalization, not missing things. So it's what the tree of thought allows you to do. So you can, for example, propose three distinct hypotheses, submit that to the model about different aspects of the text, and then proceed like this. So the slide is online. It's on the tzadra.org website. So please, I will not go through the whole slide, but you see that's the way the model works, and it's just running different options here, considering them parallelly, not as a sequence in that case, right? And that can be really interesting, and that can be dreadful if what you need to have is a linear process, in which case algorithmic prompt would be better. If you want the model to go through stages, then you will follow a kind of procedure, right? And if it has to do that, then you don't want to use this kind of prompt. So, all right, so we're here now, and we've been there, and I'm going to go back to our Sandinimochana Sutra. So I'm going to cover different type of text here. What is really important for us to consider is the issues I think we have as translators, and whether the models can help us solve them. Remember last week we were talking about how the Drupatang Dewa Chikpa, this Eka Yoga Kshema compound in Sanskrit, in chapter 5 of the Sandinimochana Sutra, can be wrongly understood, and Tillemans made that clear in an article he wrote in 1997. And so here, some translators may be tempted to read this as same establishment and abiding, for example, or happiness, and literally. And then what we know the term actually means in this very specific context is having the same destiny. And we're talking here about the Alaya Vijnana taking over, a body during the process of rebirth, and how the two become, emerge in having the same destiny from there on. And so that's really what the term is about, how it's used. Has nothing to do with they have the same establishment and abiding or happiness, or that wouldn't work. So when we work on this specialized terminology, having the possibility to add a glossary, to get back to the question, right, is really interesting, because you can have a specialized glossary there if the model hasn't been trained, or has been trained but doesn't necessarily consider its possibilities. Having in the documentation, the project documentation, called space or project knowledge, according to different models, right, used. They have different terms to refer to this documentation, but uploading your glossary and prompting the model to look at that can really produce better translation results. And so you can even go into a discussion. So here was a whole conversation about, analyze this and tell me this and that. So I go into that. And now I know by experience, because of having translated the Sunday Chance to try, that there is this huge issue with some Tibetan translations of Sanskrit compounds that can be that appears in the form of a tat purusha, for example, genitive tat purusha, right? So possessive tat purusha, but they are going to actually, render above vrihi a possessive compound in the original Sanskrit text and without any possessive particle in Tibetan. And that can be an issue. And I want the model to tell me about that. And so, I'm asking the model if this expression in the Derge version of the Samdhimachana Sutra is used always as a tat purusha, which would be weird to me, or sometimes as a bhavri, and I'm saying check things there. So we're in level in the translation process where we can investigate and then have a sense and keep questioning. And if the text we input is large enough, it gives context to a certain paragraph, because the model can go and check on different occurrences of this kind of compounds and see across your source text, or maybe even across a corpus, how the compound is used. And if it makes sense to go with a tat purusha here above rihi, for example. So these little things, that's something that would take so much time. And most people would go with translation without having a sense at the text level, the macro level, or the corpus level, what we have here. So here we can check for collocations, right? Co-occurrence of terms, technical terms. We can check the compounds. And now if we talk about canonical text translation, that's a huge issue. That is a huge issue, as we will see in another text, because I think there's another example of that there. So, or another thing we have to consider in another text, I will show you in a minute. So there are different issues to be considered. So is there a way we can take into account all these problems that we will be facing, and they're different considering the Tibetan genre we are involved with at a given time for a specific project? They're going to be different set of issues, but there are definitely there is a list of, as human translators, we go through, consciously or not, when we read our text, right? We go through our things, okay, at the sentence level, did I get it right? How the clauses fit together. And these issues, for example, they're less important in some contexts, but they can become central for a doctrinal philosophical text where logical connections between clauses become like a whole thing. So there are things like that. And with Claude, the good thing is that because it lets you prompt, you can either explore these issues in your text, get a sense in the translation, how it affects the translation in real time. And then what you can do too is even write a little prompt to ask Claude to consider all these points before it translates. And we'll see the result is quite amazing, actually. So let me now go through one of these texts here. All right. So here I want to thank really wholeheartedly David Mellins and Kaya Fisher, because they got in touch with me and we looked at a text they're working on together right now, which is, what is it? It's the Udana Varga Vivarana by Prajna Varman, I think. It's 8th, 9th century commentary, Tenjo text, epitome of the canonical Tibetan text translated from the Sanskrit, where a lot of issues are found, because the text is, the passage in question can be very simple, and I'll show you the text in a minute, but there are a lot of issues, multiple issues that we keep encountering, I think, when we deal with this type of Tibetan literature. For example, implicit subjects, Tatpurusha Bhavrihi issue, Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit translated automatically. You translate it into Tibetan, without necessarily using the term that in Tibetan would have been used, later, like say a few centuries later for the same thing. So a kind of gap here between the Sanskrit or Sanskritized Prakrit, which I think is an issue in this text, and then the Tibetan rendering of this hyper-specialized, but sometimes idiosyncratic terminology. And so really, a list of issues like this can be made, and we'll see what we can do with it. So we worked on this text. I don't know if I have the passage here with Claude first. So yeah, it's here. And the passage we're going to be looking at is this little passage here. So it's at the very beginning, I think, of the commentary. And so it's quite complex because this is the translation that Claude produced. I'm showing this just to get a sense of what we're talking about. We're talking about how we have to rely on a guru and others. What is it? And determine, other gurus, other antidotes, other means. That's how the text works. Very, cryptic. And that for the full elimination of defilements. And then there is a sentence about how it makes sense then to protect monastic vows or monastic discipline. And here it's translated ordination, which doesn't fit, obviously, for the duration of one's life. And then there's this idea, that if a very difficult sentence too, because it's very, very cryptic in the Tibetan. And so, what we have here, so this sentence here, I don't know if you can see it, I can maybe. Okay. So you have multiple terms here that are undefined and terms that are not necessarily used how they should be, as we'll see. For example, Yongdakvara Chungwa is used here in a way that can mean just arising in them. So, what is this there? And then here, arising of what, where? Is it the practice of the right way to practice the conduct that will arise in them? A lot of questions. And you see, it's incredibly simple, the text. The syntax is a bit complex because there are things you have to make sense of, like the congichir, why is that there, ditar, and then you have the semantic level, where we have a metaphor about a lamp. Right after that, is compared to, what is happening in that sentence. And then the metaphor is detailed here, and it doesn't necessarily easily make sense with what is being said here. So multiple issues, simple words in a way with a few traps. But I mean, when you put everything together, like what is happening here, right? And so that's what we've been looking at with David and Kaya. I want to thank them again for letting me show this example because it's quite interesting. So my first lazy approach to that was, all right, and here now I want more than the text, right? We're not working on the text really. I want to use that just to illustrate what models can do. But being lazy, I said, okay, let's find a way to first let the models work for me and see if I can get a script, a prompt that will, so you can question. You see, you have the text in the project knowledge. I can ask, is there any talk of Buddha nature anywhere? Because of the lamp metaphor and what it refers to, I'm trying to understand what's going on. So what I'm trying to do now is to find a shortcut. It's a long prompt here, but I'm trying to find a shortcut to first, before going into the text on a human level, try to produce the best possible machine translation, and then check it. So that was the first approach. And so here I had this tree of thought prompt where I inputted the free translations from Manlam AI, Dhamma Mitra, and Claude. And so ask for ask the model to go through these steps to produce a better translation, hopefully. But the idea is that we go through a sequence of steps during which we're going to consider 3 layers of hypothesis for different translation choices. And then at each step, we want the model to evaluate the terminology, the pattern of the argumentation through the metaphor, and other contextual factors. So we go through that. So the model says, okay, I'm going to take the 3 hypotheses, and look at what can make sense or not, compare the output translations of the 3 models, and propose another translation. So now I'm doing that for the entire passage. So that's the text that have been produced by Dhamma Mitra, Manam AI, and Claude. And you see, they don't understand things. The passage is so cryptic, and there are so many issues of implicit subjects or unstated reference, right, for metaphors, for verbal expressions, their verbal nouns, all these that we don't. Yeah, the margin of error is here huge, because if you go for one, you have 2 issues essentially. If you go for one translation choice, this is going to impact other choices you'll make. So everything holds together, right? There are simply too many things in this very short passage that are left open. And for the models, that's the worst thing. And so we have to find a way to see first what makes sense in this short passage. And that's why I'm using this approach first. But then maybe we have to help the model by supplying more information, which is the next thing we're going to see. So here, we're feeding the model with different hypotheses in terms of translation. And the model is going to go and consider them and go and with like recommendations, right? So looking at the context, is it an Abhidharma context, talking about Vinaya, we're talking about vows, monastic, vows or renunciation vows, depending how we want to translate, Ratu Chungwa, that's another issue. But here, I'm not even looking at that, and to be honest, at this stage, I want to see if the model can make sense of the passage. And then the choice of terminology, what's the best translation for Latu Chungwa and all that, is something we can discuss next. But the question is, do we really have the best here, the best rendition of the structure, semantic and logic structure of the passage? So we go with that. So it goes with a synthesis. It's not bad, it reads quite well, but actually there's still quite a lot of issues. So I sent this to David and Kaya, and they were like, yeah, I don't know really. And yep, and then it reads really well, but a lot of questions are open. Like some of this kuntu chupa, mayinpa. Is it like wrongdoing, or is it something else? There are a lot of options here, and so the model goes for one logical option, considering what the initial translations were. It's quite interesting, but I think we need to go one step further. And yesterday, I said, okay, I thought I had something that was really cool, and it is in a way, because you can, you can ask yourself more questions, go through the whole reasoning of the model, considering the various translations coming from elsewhere, and we could have used human translations there, too, which would be really interesting, too, right? So you have your translation, and we're talking about hyper-technical text that may have been translated just like that from one Prakrit, hyper Sanskritization in it, just automatically by one translator centuries ago, and that has never been quite used on the level of pragmatics and linguistics, right, where people actually engage in communication, like having this kind of like very specific understanding. Like, we don't know if that culture got lost. We don't know if there was any community that really went as deep as what we're doing right now, even. But that's the fascinating thing, is that with this model, we can really go into that. Now, here, so yesterday I went back to the blackboard, whiteboard, screenboard, and I was thinking, okay, is there any way we can improve on that? And so I still have to go back to David and Kaya with this result. And I hope I didn't do too much overfitting. I didn't design this prompt to just work on this particular passage. I hope not. I haven't had time to test it. But I came with this monster prompt that Claude and ChatGPT think is a kind of network of thought, because it's not an hypothesis anymore, just a parallel hypothesis we're running. We're going to consider all possibilities, semantic possibilities on different levels, and build a matrix of translations, a network of possible translations, and ask the model what makes sense. So we can discard things that are nonsensical, we can discard things that are too idiosyncratic for being considered, and then we can focus on, what most probably makes sense, considering the doctrinal background, historical, cultural things. I mean, like, what the text is about. And so this is the prompt that I my best effort so far. So I go with the user will provide a complex passage in Tibetan. Read all the quick tables. So what I did, and I show you guys this, but what I did was to, I produced these keyword in context tables because the text is too large to be fed automatically into a cloud. So I realized that one way to fix this is to have these tables where key terms are at the center, right? In corpus linguistics, they call that these keyword in context tables. And I added glossary, so exactly what we're talking about earlier. And the reason why I did that, so here you see in my knowledge base, so I have the original source text here. So you see, it's been a lot of attempts, and I have another account having like a bunch of them. So I think I reiterated 30 or 40 times to produce this script, which finally I was kind of happy with. I'm sure it can get better, but so a lot of experiments with prompting to get somewhere. But anyways, I realized that some terminology, some of these phrases were happening a lot in our text, a lot. They were coming back, and some of them are quite, as mentioned earlier, can be maybe Tibetan renditions of Sanskritized Prakrit expressions as such, without any modification automatically. Sambhava, but Sambhava in this, for example, in this layer of literature, if you go on the Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit dictionary, you'll find mentions that this can mean not just arising, so sambhava, right? But it can mean to be cleansed, to be unstained. And that's quite interesting in our context, I thought. So I think that's definitely something we should consider. We shouldn't necessarily follow that blindly, but we have, and that's what we do as humans, right? We go through these things. So anyway, we go there, and I put the glossary, and the glossary, I don't know if I can show the glossary here. Yeah, so in very short glossary for two things that were problematic. So we have your Yamdak Paratumwa here, and then we have Tselwa, which in that sense is as well. You see, we have, and here I thought, okay, this one is a archaic spelling of Tselwa essentially. And so it may be good to give a chance to the model to understand that. So it's there to be considered, not necessarily to be followed, right? And here, for all these technical terms, I have these keyword in context tables. So 500 words on both sides of the key term that gives context to the model to understand. Okay, that's the way this metaphor is used in this text. That's the way this technical term is used in this text, and so on and so forth, right? So now we go there, we go back here, and I have this script where I followed. I was trained with Michel Hahn, approach in Germany, where it's very and in Austria, which it's very systematic, right? I think Joe Wilson in the US had this kind of approach too. You want to know at the sentence level what's going on. You want to know then between clauses how they relate to another. And then there are a series of specific issues I just mentioned that I listed there. So first, get a sense of what the passage is about. I realized that while prompting, that's essential because it gives an idea to the model about what is the topicalization. And here, as we will see, it's about the elimination of afflictions, which is important because if you have implicit subjects or unstated reference for metaphors and things like this, the model can use that information as the most like plausible, maybe, filler for that subject that's not stated or that like metaphor reference no one understands. So then we go with like identify the main word senses of all key terms. I want a systematic approach. There are word senses that can be radically different, for a given term, and I want the model to be aware of that and to be aware of stock phrases or technical terms, meaning the semantic unit of a word may not be relevant as a word, but as a compound, so a series of words in some context, and I want the model to think about that. Identify different possible reference or figure of speech. What does the metaphorical term stand for? That's an essential question. The model has to test various hypotheses regarding this point. So what is marme in our text standing for? Identify implicit terms in the paragraph and determine pronouns. There is an arising of X. X arises in those who. What does it mean? So you see, that's questions when you read the text, and I think that's when I remember when I was a beginner in reading Tibetan text, I would just come up with a translation. And then, my good mentors and professors would like be, what is this it about? What do you mean with it? I was like, it's correct. And they were like, yeah, but what does it mean? What is it referring to? And so that's exactly, I think, what we have to teach the model to improve the translation. You have a lot of translation first draft, you're going to have it arises in the middle of the paragraph, and you have no idea what this it is about, So undetermined pronouns or impersonal pronouns and personal terms of phrase and stuff, you want to make sense of that. And find what implicit or unstated terms must be added into the translation. Identify if verbal terms or verbal adjectives like making. So that's another thing in the German Austrian tradition of Michel Hahn that is very important, is to ask yourself these questions. And these traditions were philological tradition were very much set on philosophical doctrinal accuracy. And so asking yourself when you have am I talking anything like that, right? With this wa construction, is that a verbal adjective qualifying something? Is that a noun is nominalized? Or is it like, nominalized referring to an agent or a subject? Like a verbal adjective, those who make, right? It's like making, those who make, or the maker, or the making. So we have to ask ourselves constantly these questions in this philosophical, doctrinal literature text, so type of text. And here it comes with my matrix / network of thought. So now I'm saying, okay, take all these like critical aspects of the text and build a matrix of a network of possibilities for all that. And then produce a list of resulting translations by combining the semantic interpretations of word senses, reference, and state subject by combining all possibilities. This could yield a large number of potential translations. So I'm building a matrix with all these possibilities, right? So like crisscrossing possibilities, combining them and asking them, well, okay. Then you're going to rank or evaluate those interpretations based on logical connections between sentences, compatibility with the original text, rhetorical consistency of metaphors or figure of speech, and logical compatibility with the rest of the text. So you see, now we're on the level of logic and how things fit together. And that's one big criterion for choosing, these translations. So we go with that and we get a result. So the model goes step by step. And here I have a little like a thing here, and you want to have something like this, because if you don't, Claude or most LLMs sometimes will skip things, sometimes will be lazy and jump to 0.5. I don't understand why it's like that, but you really have to insist. I want you to follow these steps, like, very carefully. And so we go through now the passage and the whole like reasoning. So there is feedback here, and I could ask Claude to expand that even further, but you have feedback on, okay, what's going on here? Key terms analysis. So from the glossary, okay, I understand it may mean this. Okay, Farnad means like unstained, so that would be this Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit Tibetan term instead of like Sambho as a rising simply. So, and as you can see, this can radically change the translation. So that's an important piece of information. So it builds a matrix of interpretations, metaphorical network, it goes implicit subjects, it starts considering, what is purified, what is the method of purification, what light and clarity could stand for, what the walls, cloth lace in the original text represents. So it's starting to take this into account. I want to have a better prompt for that and develop even further, but it's complicated to have full control of what Claude is doing there. Okay, so now possible interpretations based on semantic combinations. So here we see, again, the model is going through possibilities here. And then finally, so comes up with this translation. So fictions are purified through reliance on teachers and such because one observes a complete protection of monastic ordination vows, terminology. That's another issue. But it comes up with something. It's still a bit funky to my test, and that's why I have another script now. And I realized that it was super important to layer. At the beginning, I had one monster script, and now I think this is really why we're going towards agents for very specific tasks, because the logic of these models, it works quite well. If you're thinking of this, software to edit photos and videos, you can apply filters, right? You can layer the kind of way you work with an image, and so by adding different types of filters, and the same logic works really well here. We are going to add filters through agents. Like I think in a way that's mini agents. In this one is prompted to be an editor now, looking at the translation above. And so here I'm realizing there are common mistakes made by Claude because I've been doing that 40 or 50 times, running the same script, modifying a little bit, seeing the results. So I understand that sometimes it translates a term twice. I don't want that. So I'm asking here, making a list of common mistakes. And here I'm going full on with the Michel Hahn approach in a way. For those who are familiar with that, I'm saying, okay, make sure that the syntactic rendering is correct at the sentence level. And then at the clause level, verify that the logic and semantic connections between sentences, metaphors, implicit subjects, and verbal terms make sense. So then we're going through the semifinal particles and how they should be, because we have a lot of them, and a lot of these texts, they use these semifinal particles for logical connections too, but in different ways. And since we always get the same semifinal particle like they or they, or we don't know really how to translate that, and that can completely affect the final understanding of the text. So, and then another thing I realized could be important is to verify the semantic prosody of the translation, whether it's negative or positive. So sometimes the model is going to use a term in English that is not going to be positive, and for something that actually is positive in the original text. So we want to be careful about that. So anyway, what I think is that such prompts, it's an example, could be a way forward in getting more accurate translations, because you give access to background information through the quick tables to the model. You have kind of various agents. One will translate, another one will check, another one can check about just the compounds, for example. Another one could check, that's something I will experiment on next. And if you're on Discord, I will post there my results. So stay tuned. But the thing is, we can add, one agent that specializes just about Sanskrit compounds and the way they're rendered into Tibetan. And so that's, I think, really where this whole thing is going. So here are results of that. So is my academic journal error is checking things ruthlessly. Okay, that's correct. That was not precisely translated according to the glossary. So some terms were not translated. Anyway, close level analysis, and it comes up with this, which is much better, I think, and I think we're getting somewhere slowly. with this passage. There still need to be work on that. But through reliance on teachers and such, afflictions are purified. And I like the con here. One observes the complete protection of monastic ordination vows, right? That has to be changed probably, but for as long as one lives. There is nothing that does not function by any method, even for a short time, and their practice becomes unstained. Like about, and here we have still something that's on this line here, not fully working. That's something for which we need like to prompt, to refine the prompt clearly. But the metaphor is getting like a very interesting reading here. And I'll be discussing this in more details in the coming days with David and Kaya. That is helping me a lot, working on different texts like this. So it can be interesting to keep track of all these things and how we address, as a community, these challenges through prompts in the case of Claude, or by evaluating results in the case of Dhamma Mitra. And here it's going to be soon time to close, but I want to stress that how collaboration is important for us. Really, we're a small community of Dharma translators and academic researchers working on, or both sometimes, right? But working on these texts and giving feedback on translation, particularly to the Dharma Mitra team we've been working with, is incredibly important because we can further train the model with Sebastian's amazing work. We're so fortunate to have Sebastian and Kurt, doing this. Like Kurt started this whole thing. Sebastian is finding new amazing ways to get better and better translations. But we have to take responsibility by saying, okay, this is an example maybe of something that doesn't work. This is something that really works well. Giving them feedback will be extremely helpful. So if you have aligned passages, if you annotate things, it could be good to share this information with the Dhamma Mitra team. We can use it. We can post these things on the Discord channel we created. You can send me an email or send Sebastian an email. But what I mean is, it's very important, and maybe in the coming weeks or months, we'll find ways of getting in touch with you guys and maybe asking you a little bit of help, maybe 5-10 minutes to rate translations or to tell us what you think, to give us some feedback. And hopefully you'll be there because these tools, we can really improve them, but we're gonna have to do this as a team. So short note, because I got another question about post-editing
Before
thing.
you move on,
Oh,
Greg,
okay.
just about the Dharma Mitra, soon they'll be launching a function on their right there, probably on the lower right, I imagine, but we'll
Yeah,
see, that will let you immediately send that result to them and comment on it. So
that's
that should be
awesome.
coming pretty soon.
That's
Uh,
fantastic.
so they're developing this as we speak.
It's very important, and please, guys, use it. It's essential. Will really help us have a better model and better alignments, right, in the future.
Yeah.
So maybe just before closing, very short and very quickly, because I had a question recently by email on that. We can use Claude 2 to annotate, to produce annotations and indexing. I'm still very much experimenting with this, but if you have your own documentation, you can, as I showed earlier, upload, your own glossary or your own notes in the project documentation there, and then you can tap in that for Claude to write notes. We know that this is sometimes a lot of work and repetitive work too, because if you have to write a note and if you're like Sarah and you work on Cho and you produce so much on Cho and you have for every book to write a note on the same thing, so that can be useful in a way. I mean, the information, if it's correct, is not going to change much, and so having a glossary and using it to write notes that will help the reader rate from book to book or research project to research project, then it's something that can be extremely useful. I believe. And then you can reach a high degree of consistency. It will help you as well. Right? Remember notes, maybe you forgot in the meantime, because if you write 600 or 700 notes, it's not like, easy to remember everything about every single technical term and why it should be there. So that's something where I believe these LLMs can be extremely useful, both for the reader by having better annotation or better sense of what should be annotated in the first place, and then for the translator, because yeah, it will speed up things. Indexing, same thing. I do believe it's working, and I'm gonna have to experiment more on that. But so you see, it can go really here. Basic, very basic task, basic prompt, quick. And the thing that's interesting is that you can have main entries and sub entries too about something. So the tool understands concept, and the fact that Claude has been trained on clearly Tibetan Buddhist texts and translations and research shows that, yeah, look, Dharma Dhammadhatu as a knowledge object, nature of realization of, it's quite good. It's quite nice. I mean, you know. So yeah, in this little text I tested it on, it found a lot of like good stuff in technical terms are identified. So it's something that is very promising. Now, one issue I'm seeing is the linkage between this index, the skeleton of the index, and the page numbers. And you see, so here we have as well cross referencing terms, which is really good. And this is something where you see that's a task, and I will conclude on that one thing. I think that this morning I listened to a YouTube video that was saying that a Berkeley AI researcher could replicate what DeepSeek did with following the approach they described in the paper, and then produce a small model that is incredibly powerful by using the same approach. This is really opening the door now to hyper specialized agents, very small models that at some point we may run on our computers, because if you don't need a gigantic, huge LLM that can do everything but requires like 50,000 supercomputers to work together for 6 months, then it means that you can start training models, you can start producing models that will deal with this one layer, as we were talking about, of issues translations have, and then fix that. And you can have a kind of workflow of these little guys, little agents that will look at one thing and then fix it, and then the next one is picking it up from there and then checking the next thing. For example, since let's say we train a model on the Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit dictionary, that Egerton produced, which is amazing, for a kind of like agent that will flag potential Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit terminology in the Tibetan. That would be already quite amazing. Now I'm like using these texts with Yandak Para Chungwa. It's at least some question we have to ask ourselves, right? There are some steps for canonical Tibetan literature that are going to be always like, for tantric literature, that'd be another set of issues. But for a lot of Tanjiro texts, doctrinal texts, or Buddha's life type text and all this, then you have these questions, and they will, for most texts, come back and keep coming back. So, Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit terminology, logical connections between clauses, not so important for a sadhana maybe, but for, doctrinal text, Madhyamika text, or anything, extremely important. So we are going towards this thing where you're going to have different agents, probably, I believe, that will be really good at these tasks. And then what you can do is that you can have another agent that will identify the genre of text you're dealing with, and then deploy tools that are fitting for that specific genre. For example, if you're translating Tibetan poetry, you have different issues that if you're translating a Pramana text translated from Sanskrit into Tibetan. So yeah, we are going towards this thing, and I think we're just at the beginning. And at this stage, for us, it's more, I think, to conclude, what is really important is to see the benefits and the limitation of these tools. I think I've been trying in this series of webinars to do that. So there are areas where they can be helpful. We can as well enter conversations with them. It's like having someone there to look at our text and help us define what are the questions we should ask ourselves and how they can help us do that. And so we are, discovering these tools. The world has changed in a way the past 6 months, right, Marcus? In a way, I mean, things are completely, and they keep changing so fast. I mean, as we've seen with the whole deep sea drama, right, in a way. So things keep
Mhm.
changing. We're trying to follow all that. We'll be on Discord, so please join us there. And I hope you enjoyed the series of webinar. I'm sure you guys will have more questions. Please just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to, look at everything. May take a little bit of time because I have a pile of emails to answer. But yeah, I hope to see you on Discord. And yeah, I hope you'll keep in touch and help us develop better models with Dhamma Mitra, with the Dhamma Mitra team.
Wonderful. Thank you. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. So we'll keep in touch on Discord and via email, and I hope we can continue these discussions. All right. Have a great weekend. Happy
Bye
Friday.
bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.